The illustrations in the book are, some of them are brilliant, and I've enjoyed them immensely. Now, I'm turning my back on you, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Here is one that you used, and I'm going to have to show in the book. Let's first show the original photograph from the dead at Gettysburg, am I right?
Petersburg.
It's Petersburg, I'm sorry. And this is one that you, who brought out the illustrations? Who found them? Did you do this?
I did the research for them, and I sort of, what I would do is I would choose the photographs or the paintings, like the one we showed at the top of the broadcast, and then I would sort of choose what context I wanted to put it in, and then make a rough mock-up of that myself, send it to someone who really knows how to do these things, and then it turns into this, which of course is...
This is an illustration that came from, I think, about the 20th century illustration of Lincoln wiping his brow, and the axe in this Petersburg soldier, dead soldier. We didn't know. In the 20th century, they made that soldier a log. In the 20th century illustration.
That's a terrible, terrible cover-up. And then this, I think, is 3 different elements. It's the soldier, and then the background is Gettysburg.
Yes.
The dead from Gettysburg.
You took the Petersburg soldier, put it in the dead at Gettysburg, and Lincoln. But we know that this is actually probably what, a Brady or a Gardner photograph originally.
Probably, probably Gardner.
It was Gardner.
Well, I mean this whole deal right here. The real,
Well, this of course was in the book. It's just an original painting of, Lincoln's conquest over vampires. I have no idea what you mean. I don't know who Gardner or Brady is.
Of course, again, that's one of the questions that, that some might feel these illustrations are real. So I would hope that people will approach this book in the correct vein.
I hope so. No pun intended. I hope so.
Yes, exactly.
I think that the goal for me was the pleasure eating that I do. Doris Kearns Goodwin, Walter Isaacson, David McCullough, people who write history with a flair, people who bring history alive, but then again also have footnotes and illustrations and facts. I wanted it to feel very much like one of those books. I wanted to put footnotes in the bottom of pages. I wanted to support the hypothesis of the book with photographic evidence. I wanted it to feel as much like a real biography as possible.
Here's another illustration that you use, a very famous photograph of Lincoln.
Very uncomfortable meeting.
And exactly.
To be a fly on the wall in that tent.
Well, it puts a different light on it's been photoshopped out here, I think, the axe that Lincoln had, when he was there with McClellan.
But right here, it's been covered up right here, but Lincoln actually brought his axe with him to make his point.
Well, it also puts a different light on McClellan, and now I understand McClellan more if Lincoln thought he could have been a vampire himself.
Well, because think about it, McClellan was so bad. Okay, you had to think that he's either the worst general who's ever lived, or he's working for the other side. And if he's working for the other side, it's a fair, I mean, McClellan, ultimately though, I think that vampires would be embarrassed if he were a vampire.
We have a question here, Dave?
Comment and question.
A comment.
First comment was, did anyone notice that the governor of Virginia did not mention vampirism in his proclamation of the Confederacy and the Civil War? I think that was a huge leave-out.
Right.
The second is, it's well known that Lincoln and his wife were very anxious to go to California. Was there any particular reason he wanted to go to California?
Oh boy.
Was there a large, perhaps, group of vampires out there that needed to be taken care of?
Maybe. I mean, maybe he was just trying to get in on the gold rush. I don't know. I mean, maybe he just wanted out. Maybe he was like, there was the Michael Corleone thing. Is I want out of the family business. I want out of this vampire, all this death. Take me away. No, I don't know. But again, I think that Jefferson Davis and his compadres were equally clever in knowing that if they exposed the real vampire causes behind the Civil War, then they were either going to do themselves in or create mass panic. So I think both sides were content to fight it as a proxy war.
I was, we find out in the book, by the way, that John Wilkes Booth and Mary Surratt was hanged, one of the 4 hanged for the conspiring against Lincoln and his death, and that they had an actual affair. It's been hinted by some, but now we know that.
Conclusively, we know now.
Yeah, exactly. And you write of Booth playing the role of Pescara in The Apostate. Now, Pescara, of course, is anti-tyranny, and Mary's niece, Catherine Helm, wrote a book after after all of this was done, and in that she speaks about going to the theater with Lincoln, Mary, and seeing Booth. And Booth, during a soliloquy against tyranny, was looking up at Lincoln the entire time. And Catherine tells how that she leaned over and said, that seems pointed at you. And Lincoln whispered to her, it did seem kind of pointed. And so they kind of saw that. So it's too bad, I think, that, for Lincoln, that he did not recognize Booth as a vampire. I shouldn't have said that, sorry.
No, it's okay. I think people can make that assumption. Yeah.
And because he could have saved his own life by leaping on the stage right then and taking him out.
Yes, but there's also this fatalistic quality of Abraham Lincoln, the man and the version of Abe in this book. Abe wanted very badly to do something to leave his mark on the world. I think that when he realized that the war was going to end, when he realized that the country was going to, although it would be difficult, mend itself, I think he felt that sense of accomplishment. And I think that in a way, he was old and he was so tired and he had suffered so much that, maybe it's being far too romantic even for this book to think that, he was okay with it. But there's part of me that wants to believe that he was okay with it. That it was just time, because
well, he was fatalistic in that regard.
He was fatalistic in that regard, and he actually did say that he can't. I know there are people out there that want to kill me, but what am I supposed to do? Live my life like that? I mean, if it happens, it happens. So there is this romantic notion in my mind that perhaps he heard the click of the gun as the hammer was drawn back and had that and squeezed Mary's hand, or I mean, it's probably not at all true, but this is how I make it okay for myself.
Now, there is a letter that you start a chapter off with a quote in each chapter, and everything else isn't real, but these are real quotes.
These are real quotes.
It's to George Robertson on August 15th of 1855, a favorite of mine. And I want to quote it. It's page 91 here, I think. And the autocrat of all the Russias will resign his crown and proclaim his subjects free republicans sooner than will our American masters voluntarily give up their slaves. I suggest everyone, by the way, read in the collected works, August 15th, 1855, his letter to George Robertson, because he also goes on to say he cannot see that they could free slaves peacefully. He foresaw the war as the only way to rid the country truly of slavery. That's in 1855. So the same with vampires, it seems. The only war can free mankind from them. And you put in here a number of people from the era make their case in the book. And you have abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison speaking of the vampireness of slavery. So speak to us a bit about this whole subject of slavery and vampires and how Lincoln was going to destroy that.
Sure. Well, I didn't decide to actually go ahead and write the book until I gave myself 2 months to learn everything I could about Lincoln, to give myself a journeyman's grasp of his real history, so I could then proceed to mess with all that history, but at least know what I was talking about and at least put some of that real history in, because I thought that the more real factual history was in the book, the more fun it would be, because then you don't know if this little detail is incorrect or that, it keeps you guessing. So, but even after I became interested in Lincoln, even after I was bitten by the Lincoln bug and realized what a tragic, amazing life he had and wanted very badly to write this book, I still didn't have a theme. And that theme came to me when I made that connection between slaveholding and vampirism. And to me, it's basically you're doing the same thing. You are stealing someone's blood. You are taking someone's life to further your own means, to enrich your own life, to keep your own life going. once I made that connection and realized, well, then, you know, the slaveholders then would naturally have a vested interest in helping the vampires, and the vampires the slaveholders, and then what they would be in league together, and tying those evils together. That's when it all sort of came into focus for me, and the whole book sort of laid itself out before my eyes. So, yeah, it just made sense that you know, an abolitionist would see that as well.
William Lloyd Garrison, July 4th, 1829, saying,
Right.
"Still, if we had any regard for our safety and happiness, we should strive to crush the vampires which is feeding upon our lifeblood."
Right.
So they knew then, and you were saying in the
Right.
book how in the halls of Congress they were all talking about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you know, there are no secrets in Washington. You know,
No.
behind the halls of power. I mean, and people ask me all the time, "Is this a political book?" And I say, "Well, it's about Abraham Lincoln. How is it not a political book?" You know, I mean, no, it's not about the overt politics of who the vampires are and who the, you know, it's more about the evil of slavery and the you know the yearning to be free.
Yeah.
You know.
During your research, did you find any other famous vampire or infamous or unknown vampire hunters in history? Those were unknown. Gandhi, for instance?
Well, no, Gandhi, maybe. I mean, but he's so passive. He would be a terrible vampire hunter. He would just sit there and just try to reason with them, and
Yeah.
you know,
Can they be
vampires are
reasonable?
very well. Some of them can be, but then they get hungry, and you know.
Don't we all?
Well, yeah, I can. Sure, I found some others. I think you know, Lincoln has an interesting relationship in this book with Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
And that was something that never happened in real life. They never met in real life.
Oh.
Which, you know, or at least in
Now you're
the,
talking.
I'm sorry, at least in the, you know, published version of history. We have a picture of them together, of course, which means they did meet.
Yeah, because he and Mary were never pictured together, but he and Poe obviously were. I'll
That's
find
right.
this while you're
That's
talking.
right. Yeah, and so Poe, in real life, Lincoln was an admirer of Poe's work, and
Yes.
at one point in his life could recite The Raven from memory, and even attempted Gothic poetry himself. So it made sense to me that, you know, Lincoln was in Washington. During his one term in Congress, and Poe was in Baltimore at the same time.
close
Why
by.
couldn't they meet up? Why couldn't they have some little adventures together? And I think at one point, you know, because Poe is obviously so Gothic, so dark, that Lincoln asks him, "Well, do you want to hunt vampires or do you want to be a vampire? I can't really, you know, I can't tell which." Actually, Lincoln actually mistakes Poe for a vampire at first, but yeah. So Poe is a vampire hunter. Seward also Seward has his hand in the vampire hunting as well.
I would have thought Stanton certainly would have been.
Well, Stanton is the obvious choice, you see, but
Yes.
Seward, diminutive, educated little Seward, you know, he's actually quite nasty with an axe himself.
I'm going to read something from the second inaugural address. "Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn by the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." In reading Lincoln's writings, did you find any other allusions to vampires? I think this is an obvious one, but are there others that you found?
Yeah, in the Lincoln Douglas debates, there are, you know, specifically they're hard to remember at this moment, but there are a couple times where it feels like Lincoln is coming dangerously close to you know, revealing the truth, and he's doing that to sort of scare Douglas, who of course we know is in league. He's not a vampire himself, but is in league with the vampires. The bad vampires, for a time, anyway. And there's a real quote, too, early on in the book that says something like, now it's not going to come to me, but the answer is yes. I did find strange, just as when I was reading Pride and Prejudice and found these strange coincidental little things that could be used for zombies, I found some strange quotes and some strange coincidences in Lincoln's real life that could be used for vampires.
There should be no surprise that the axe was the
Absolutely.
symbol
Yeah.
of the 1860 campaign, the rail splitter. it's not a surprise. Now, of course, Lincoln was had a personal interest in technology and science and advancement, inventions especially. What were the tools that Lincoln used in hunting, and did he himself invent anything that was useful for him?
He adapted things that were useful for him. He used, let's see, the axe is obviously number one. He used pistols, he used muskets, he used crossbows.
Yeah, the martyr.
The martyr is the one thing. The martyr is actually a name that he gives for, it's a flare, basically, that he makes, like, you know, early, it's like a giant match head, because these are the earliest self-striking matches that are out, or about this time that he's making it. And he takes his own sort of chemical compound and mushes it up and dries it out, and he has these little charcoal briquettes, basically, that if he strikes them against his buckle or something rough, they'll ignite pure white and brighter than the sun, and thereby obviously stun, blind, whatever vampires are around him long enough for him to decapitate them.
I know that you're working on, you said, on the script for the movie now, and maybe it's too early for this, but I did want to ask, do you have any other project, your next project, in the back of your head?
I do. I have a, you know, I think that whatever I do next in books, it'll have some history in it, and definitely some supernatural influence in it, but it won't necessarily be that Reese's Peanut Butter Cup kind of concept. It won't necessarily be, you know, George Washington werewolf trainer, you know, or, you know.
If you do, you're back here.
I'll be back here, yeah, definitely. I think that, you know, when I wrote Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, it was basically taking a manuscript, an existing manuscript, and weaving a story through the existing lines. With Abe, it was writing a book from the ground up, blank page, but having the training wheels of a real-life story to guide you along. Now, the next step for me, anyway, is take the training wheels off, just tell a story, but try to weave in some of those fun historical references.
So I'm certainly so grateful, Seth, that you came in
Thank
to
you
join
very
us.
much. Thanks for having me.